Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
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 Om Surabhyaya Namaha
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 Mukam karoti vacharam pangum langayate girim Yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are here at Sayadri Parashuram Gurukula, sitting in the Prasadam Hall to be. We have been reading from chapter number 1, entitled Questions by the Sages. This is in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and today we begin text number 5. Ta ekada tu munayah pratar huta utagnayah Satkritam Sutam Asinam Paprachur Idam Adarat Ta ekada tumunaya Pratar hutagnayah Satkritam Sutam Asinam Paprachur Idam Adarat Ta ekada tu munaya Pratar hutagnayah Satkritam Sutamasinam Paprachur Idam Adarat Ta ekada tu munaya Pratar hutagnayah Satkritam Sutam Asinam Paprachur Idam Adarat
Ta ekada tu
munaya
Pratar hutagnayah Satkritam Sutam Asinam Paprachur Idam Adarat Ta ekada tu munaya Pratar hutagnayah Satkritam Sutamasinam Paprachur Idam Adarat
ekadatu munayah
Ta ekadatu munayah
pratarhuta hutagnayah
pratarhuta hutagnayah
satkritam sutam asinam
satkritam sutamasinam
praprachuridamadarat
te the sages ekada one day two but munayah sages pratah morning huta burning huta agnayah the sacrificial fire satkritam due respects Sutam Sri Suta Goswami Asinam seated on Paprachu made inquiries Idam on this as follows Adarat with due regards. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. One day, after finishing their morning duties by burning a sacrificial fire and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Suta Goswami, the great sages made inquiries with great respect about the following matters. Kindly repeat after me. One day, after finishing their morning duties, by burning a sacrificial fire, and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Suta Goswami, the great sages made inquiries with great respect about the following matters. Purport. Morning is the best time to hold spiritual services. The great sages offered the speaker of the Bhagavatam an elevated seat of respect called the Vyasasana, or the seat of Sri Vyasadeva. Sri Vyasadeva is the original spiritual preceptor for all men, and all other preceptors are considered to be his representatives. A representative is one who can exactly present the viewpoint of Sri Vyasadeva. Sri Vyasadeva impregnated the message of Bhagavatam unto Srila Shukadeva Goswami, and Sri Suta Goswami heard it from him, Sri Shukadeva Goswami. All bona fide representatives of Sri Vyasadeva in the chain of disciplic succession are to be understood to be Goswamis. These Goswamis restrain all their senses, and they stick to the path made by the previous acharyas. The Goswamis do not deliver lectures on the Bhagavatam capriciously. Rather, they execute their services most carefully, following their predecessors who delivered the spiritual message unbroken to them. Those who listen to the Bhagavatam may put questions to the speaker in order to elicit the clear meaning. But this should not be done in a challenging spirit. One must submit questions with a great regard for the speaker and the subject matter. This is also the way recommended in Bhagavad Gita. One must learn the transcendental subject by submissive oral reception from the right sources. Therefore, these sages addressed the speaker, Suta Goswami, with great respect. Translation again. One day, after finishing their morning duties by burning a sacrificial fire and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Suta Goswami, the great sages made inquiries with great respect about the following matters. So Prabhupada explains how generally the ideal time or the best time for speaking on spiritual subject matters, or the best time, of course any time is good to speak about spiritual matters, but the recommended time, the general standard time, is early in the morning, when before 9 o'clock, before the mode of passion begins. The days are divided, as we know, mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. And here it specifically mentions how the sages at Naimisharanya, they were, because that is also part of the Vedic culture, that is especially meant to be seen in Gurukul, and that is why behind us, although not yet visible, there will be a Jagyashala. And the tradition is that actually the fire in the Jagyashala never goes out. And so there is one fire that burns all the time, and because previously people didn't have, lighters with gas or even matches, Previously, as we hear, the Brahmanas were so powerful that by mantra they would light fire. It might take us a few generations to have that one worked out. But mantra is so powerful that this was actually possible. So in other words, this is very much part of Vedic tradition and Vedic culture, that people gather together. And Srila Prabhupada, as we know, he instituted this practice because it's been ongoing since time immemorial, of having Bhagavatam class. In this way one can begin one's day, actually even before Bhagavatam class, as we know, there's Mangalarati, Mangala. Mangala means auspicious, to make one's day very auspicious. So the sages were practicing in this way, and they were arranging for the speaker, just like we do in our classes also. The speaker sits on a Vyasasana, which is a little bit elevated from from the audience, and he doesn't just speak anything. He speaks according to what is in the Shastra, because he is representing the knowledge given by the original speaker of the Bhagavatam, actually by the compiler of the Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva himself. So this is a very very nice practice, and there's a particular mood that is mentioned here that should be there amongst those who are attending, that there is opportunity to get clarification on, because the subject matter, as we know, different aspects of these topics that we discussed in the Bhagavatam, different aspects of spiritual subject matters are very intricate, and therefore may not immediately be understood, and therefore one is entitled to ask questions. Not only is entitled, but actually people are encouraged. As a matter of fact, our acharyas explain, and I mean Krishna himself explains in the Bhagavad Gita, that one who is actually serious should be inquisitive, should be desirous in knowing or understanding more about the topics that are being discussed, but there should be a quality to those questions. One should be respectful. Prabhupada had many kinds of audiences, and they were not they never read this. So very often there were many challenging questions put forth to Srila Prabhupada, but he understood. He took, we could say, that risk and accepted sometimes awkward and difficult situations, because he was dealing, especially in the beginning, with people who were, many of them were actually crazy is one word, I suppose. They totally ignorant of the of Vedic culture. So this is setting the scene for various discussions that will be taking place. The main discussion, of course, that is taking place will be Suta Goswami, who will basically convey to all the residents or to all the sadhus at Naimisharanya what he has heard from Srila Shukadeva Goswami when he was speaking to Parikshit Maharaj. So this is this is a common practice that we find in all different religious groups, but especially in the Vedic culture, there are specific aspects or characteristics that are given, what time of the day and how they should be conducted like that. Although it mentions here that the best time is in the morning, just like we're having our classes not in the morning but in the afternoon. So whenever it is convenient or appropriate, one can also come together and hear the subject matter. So we can begin right away to see what will be the some of the topics discussed. Text number 6. I'll just read once the text and then go to the translation and purport. Rishaya uchuhu tvaya kalu puranani setihasani janagha akyatanyapyadhitani dharma shastrani yanyuta. Translation. The sages said, respected Suta Goswami, you are completely free from all vice. You are well versed in all the scriptures. You are well versed in all the scriptures famous for religious life, and in the Puranas and the histories as well, for you have gone through them under proper guidance and have also explained them. Purport. A Goswami, actually that was mentioned in the verse we just read also. Goswami, Prabhupada was explaining Goswamis restrain all their senses and they stick to the path made by the previous acharyas. So a Goswami is not simply a question of dress. It's not only sannyasis who are Goswamis. Anyone who is controlling his senses, that's what Goswami or Swami means, master of one's senses. So Prabhupada gives further information here in the purport. A Goswami, or the bona fide representative of Sri Vyasadeva, must be free from all kinds of vices. One time, devotees had, in the early days, devotees did not know so many things. They did not understand, and they had one visitor, I forget which temple, I think one visitor from India, and possibly had a Brahmana thread, so many Brahmanas in India, and Prabhupada was not in the temple, but they had invited him to speak on the Vyasasana, like that. Prabhupada came to know, and Prabhupada was very upset that, unless you know that someone is following the principles of our Sanatana Dharma, and also unless one is wearing tilak, although the external signs are secondary, they also have their importance. Just like Vaishnava means someone who wears tilak. We can recognize by looking in the front, or we can recognize by looking in the back, by having Sikha. Sikha is also important. Sometimes, but rarely, one may do without. If you go to some places where, if you're going to be deported immediately by wearing tilak, then you don't wear tilak. But generally speaking, these are the signs of a Vaishnava. But specifically here, it is referring to the four major vices. Yeah, Goswami means one who is freed from the four, from all kinds of vices, and Prabhupada mentions here that the four major vices of Kali Yuga are number 1, illicit connection with women, number 2, animal slaughter, number 3, intoxication, and number 4, speculative gambling of all sorts. A Goswami must be free from all these vices before he can dare sit on the Vyasasana. Before he can dare to sit on the Vyasasana, one has to be freed from these 4 vices. No one should be allowed to sit on the Vyasasana who is not spotless in character and who is not freed from the above mentioned vices. He not only should be freed from all such vices, but must also be well versed in all revealed scriptures or in the Vedas. The Puranas are also parts of the Vedas, and histories like the Mahabharata or Ramayana are also parts of the Vedas. The Acharya or the Goswami must be well acquainted with all these literatures, and that is why the system of Gurukula is there, whereby in a very systematic way. Just yesterday, actually, I was having some interesting discussion with devotees from Ukraine and Russia, who were very much interested in knowing more about Varnasrama Dharma. And one of the very fundamental, essential, basic aspects of Varnasrama Dharma is the educational aspect. And I was mentioning how in the Vedic culture the wonderful aspect is that there is a standard and unchanging curriculum, not like modern day society. They're constantly changing books. We carry the same book. We don't have to carry books like students carry books, a big load of books in their back. Isn't it? Small boys, they can hardly... Yeah, right. They can hardly walk sometimes. And these books are, parents have to pay for all these books. You probably know. 5,000 rupees a year, right? Yeah. And you can't give the books to, let's say, a younger child, because next year the books change. Good business. Yeah. So this is the beauty, actually, of the Vedic culture, that these same transcendental literatures, which contain all of the knowledge and information that we need, it is there. It's the same, and therefore, if we learn it once, we know it, and we don't have to learn anything else. It's a very attractive and important aspect, actually, of the Vedic culture. Of course, even before learning so many subject matters, what is being pointed out here, and that is a fundamental aspect in the Vedic Gurukula system as well, which is absent in modern day society, is that even before you start teaching subject matters, it is more important for Gurukul students just to learn how to be good citizens, how to develop good character, how to develop the mood and mentality of a devotee, isn't it? By being submissive, by being eager to assist or to serve senior Vaishnavas, or serving the deities in different ways, which by this kind of cultivation they will be prepared to avoid these vices which are being mentioned here, right? So Prabhupada explains here, to hear and explain them is more important than reading them. This is also important. To hear, in other words, when there's a Bhagavatam class, one person is speaking and others are hearing. So it's more important to come to a Bhagavatam class either to speak or to hear than to be in one's room reading independently the Bhagavatam class. So, in other words, Sravanam Kirtanam. Sravanam Kirtanam is very basic and fundamental. My God, you're still here? Okay, it's Sunday.
Can I interrupt?
No? You can send me a text message. Few minutes. Yeah. So to hear and explain these transcendental subject matters is more important than reading them. One can assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures only by hearing and explaining. It's very interesting actually, because this process of hearing as well as speaking is beneficial for both. Because if we are forced to speak something, we have to understand or realize what we have to present it in a clear and intelligent manner, isn't it? So this is a very nice statement being made here. I mean, Prabhupada states that it is only by hearing and explaining that one can assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures. Hearing is called Sravana, and explaining is called Kirtana. Therefore, Sravanam Kirtanam leads one to Vishnu Smaranam, remembering, understanding about the subject matter. The two processes of Sravana and Kirtana are of primary importance to progressive spiritual life. Only one who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing can properly explain the subject. And Prabhupada would give as an example a comment that his own Guru Maharaj had made. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had remarked, this was in the context of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, who did not have much association, he did not meet his spiritual master very often, 5-7 times possibly. And whenever he would meet him, he would stay and hear from him. Others would sometimes, like it happened, I believe, in Vrindavan, some parikram was going on, so many devotees went on parikram, although their Guru Maharaj was speaking. But Prabhupada stayed and heard. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had mentioned later on, I have marked this, but he likes to hear. He's eager to hear. Yeah. So this is nicely pointed out here, that there is a process by which we can best assimilate. And as a matter of fact, Prabhupada actually makes a point that this is the only way we can assimilate, the only way we can understand subject matter from the revealed scriptures is either by hearing or by speaking it. By hearing it or by speaking it. So any
comment or question on this? Yes.
Hearing is, as you mentioned, somebody hears, then Kirtanam will be after that. Then after that, the Vishnu Smaranam, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Vishnu.
Yes.
So, my question is, Maharaj, that after hearing, is it very important to recollect that those things and or how the Kirtanam should be? And if somebody is not much into preaching and all, but how this Kirtanam and Vishnu Smaranam?
So your question is, we understand that first there is Sravanam, Kirtanam, then Vishnu Smaranam. So how does one, to come to Vishnu Smaranam, one should perform Kirtanam. So how to do that? The idea is that what we hear, what we understand, we should try to repeat. It's not that we have to give a class necessarily, although it's good to also do that. But we can share that. If we hear something very interesting and important that we feel can benefit someone, then we can, to the extent that we have understood what we have heard, we try to share that or repeat that with others. When we make that effort, then it helps us, as being pointed out here, that this is the second method by which we can more clearly or more deeply understand the subject matter. It can another way, which is also similar to speaking, is by writing, keeping notes or keeping a diary, because whether we are going to speak something or whether we're going to write something, we have to go through a process of expressing it, in a clear enough manner that others who either read it or speak it will understand. Just like one of the devotees who was secretary to Srila Prabhupada, Harikesh Prabhu, that was in the early days when Prabhupada was, dictating machine. So he had to transcribe. He would get the tape, he would hear, and then transcribe. And so he was reminiscing. He was speaking about how he was doing that, and he was telling that sometimes I would hear something from Prabhupada, then Prabhupada would pause for 15 seconds maybe, or 20 seconds, then I would, what happened? In other words, transcendental subject matters, and this was shown in how Srila Prabhupada himself put in writing his thoughts. But of course, as we mentioned the other day, Prabhupada explained that these were not, it was Krishna who was dictating to him, and he was in this way very thoughtful in putting down what we are reading today in the pages of the Bhagavatam. So as much as possible, a devotee who, first of all, should go on hearing should be the first of the 9 practices, or hearing begins with hearing. And then as much as possible, either speaking with someone, giving class, or writing down. This further helps one to remember and to deepen one's understanding of the subject matter. They can start keeping a diary or like that. Okay. We have someone else who has a question but may not be related to the Bhagavatam class. Maybe it is, I don't know. So we can close unless there's another something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned that somebody sits on Vyasasana.
Uh-huh.
If somebody sits in
If somebody
Vyasasana,
sits on the
it
Vyasasana,
should be these 4 But the vices, free from 4 vices.
He should be free from the 4 vices, yes.
So, and he is equal to almost the Vyasadeva one, who sits on the representative of Vyasadeva.
One who sits on the Vyasasana is directly representing Srila Vyasadeva, and Srila Vyasadeva, being the literary incarnation of Godhead, was definitely freed from the 4 vices.
But, if somebody in purification process,
If
so
someone,
he may not be have these all free from vices. We see that.
then one should not sit on the Vyasasana. Yeah. One can still speak. I mean, we can still speak, even after getting out of Vyasasana we can speak, or even before. So, but this point is being made here, that Prabhupada even uses the word, one should not dare to sit on the Vyasasana if one is not freed from these 4 vices. Yeah. So, okay, one question from our audience. Yes.
You let book which we keep like a crisscross stand, like the stand for keeping books.
You stand for keeping book, yes.
It's like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they call Vyasapita.
Vyasapita,
And Vyasasana where we sit.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're missing a Vyasapita.
Yes.
You can arrange one?
Stable. And
Oh,
what
they-
exactly Vyasasana means, whether that with arch in the behind, like we have for Srila Prabhupada.
Right.
So if we have only pillow, we can't call it like this. We cannot call it Vyasapita.
No, Vyasasana is any elevated platform. It doesn't necessarily have to have this. You're not on the Vyasasana. I mean, any elevated platform where one is sitting can be referred to as Vyasasana. And Vyasapita, I was less familiar with that, but generally the book Bhagavatam needs to be put to be placed on an elevated platform also. But actually, it should be it should be a certain height. It should not be too low. Yeah. But what you mentioned about, we call it
Yes, a pit.
yeah. In the Western world, we call it a stand. In the less cultured, book stand. But it's not a book stand because this is not a book. This is a granta, Grantaraj, the king of all literatures. Yeah, but traditionally it's like that, right?
Yeah. We go to like Udupi shop and we ask, give me one Vyasapita. They'll say immediately.
Oh, they know, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, of course, because it's Udupi. But if you ask somebody in Canada about Vyasapita, they'll look at you. What is that? Yeah.
One more Vyasasana for the Bhagavatam.
Huh?
One more Vyasasana for Bhagavatam. They may
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, well, yeah. Because as we will read in the Bhagavatam, there is the book Bhagavatam and the person Bhagavatam, and both should be given all respect. Yeah, correct.
In general case, if you are sharing just with friends, better we sit in simple, all in same platform, and we can discuss. Right?
What is that?
If you are discussing scripture with friends,
Okay.
people, so better we sit in a normal platform and talk.
If one is wanting to discuss amongst friends, then one can sit together and discuss. Yes.
Yeah.
But then at one point, if they want somebody to give a class, they should find him a Vyasasana. But otherwise, yeah, they can sit and discuss. The Goswamis of Vrindavan were doing this on a daily basis. But they possibly also had one of them, I'm not sure what system they followed, but giving a formal class, in which case he would sit on the Vyasasana also. Yeah. Okay. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Gauda Pimana.